Across the vast expanse of human history, there are stories that resonate through the ages. Tales of power, of faith, of liberation. They are etched into our collective consciousness, shaping civilizations and defining our understanding of the divine and the natural world. Few narratives are as dramatic, as terrifying, and as profoundly transformative as the story of the 10 Plagues of Egypt. It is a saga of a clash between a pharaoh, considered a god on earth, and a force that sought to dismantle his entire reality, one devastating blow at a time. This is not just a story of miracles. It is a story of cosmic confrontation played out on the banks of the Nile. We are drawn to this story, not just for its spiritual weight, but for the fundamental questions it forces us to ask. What happens when the world we know, the predictable cycles of nature we depend on, suddenly turns against us? Is it the hand of a god, a deliberate and calculated intervention in human affairs? Or can we find echoes of these catastrophic events in the intricate and sometimes violent machinery of the natural world itself? This series is a journey into that very heart of that question. We will walk through the shadow of each plague, from the Crimson River to the suffocating darkness, to understand its impact. We invite you to join us on this exploration, to suspend disbelief and embrace curiosity. We will delve into the ancient texts, seeking to understand the symbolic power and theological significance of these 10 calamities. What did they mean to the people who first told and heard these stories? How did they articulate a struggle for freedom against an overwhelming empire? But we will also turn our gaze to the world of science, to geology, climatology, and biology, searching for plausible chains of events and natural phenomena that could explain such devastation. The goal is not to debunk faith, but to enrich our understanding. Is it possible that faith and science are not mutually exclusive paths, but two different languages telling the same epic story? Could a series of ecological disasters, triggered by a single climatic event, have been interpreted by a people yearning for freedom as the righteous anger of their God? This is the grand puzzle we seek to assemble. A puzzle where every piece, whether it comes from a sacred scroll or a geological core sample, brings us closer to the truth of what happened in that ancient land, so long ago, when an empire was brought to its knees. The story begins where all life in Egypt begins, the Nile. For millennia, this majestic river was the civilization's lifeblood, its creator god. Its predictable annual flood, the Akhet, deposited rich black silt upon the arid plains, guaranteeing a bountiful harvest. It was the source of drink, of food, of transportation, of life itself. The rhythm of the Nile was the rhythm of Egypt. Now, imagine the sheer primal terror of waking one morning to find this sacred source, this giver of all things good, transformed into a river of death. The water, once teeming with life, had become thick, red, and putrid. The book of Exodus paints a chilling picture. Aaron, at the command of Moses, strikes the water with his staff, and in an instant the river turns to blood. But this was not merely a visual change, a simple discoloration. The text is explicit. The fish in the Nile died, and the river stank so profoundly that the Egyptians could not drink its water. This was a catastrophic ecological collapse. The very foundation of their existence, the divine promise of the Nile, had been grotesquely inverted. It became a symbol not of life, but of a gruesome, widespread death that permeated every canal, every stream, every vessel of wood and stone. The impact on daily life would have been immediate and devastating. Without the Nile, there was no clean water for drinking, for cooking, for bathing. The desperate Egyptians were forced to dig into the soil alongside the river, frantically searching for groundwater that had not been contaminated by this horrifying affliction. The stench of decay would have hung heavy in the air, a constant, nauseating reminder of the calamity. The economic implications were just as severe. The fishing industry, a vital source of protein for the populace, was wiped out overnight. The sacred had become profane, the source of purity, now a source of filth. This was more than just a disaster. It was a theological crisis. The Egyptians worshipped numerous deities associated with the Nile, such as Hapi, the god of the annual flood, and Osiris, who was intrinsically linked to the river's life-giving cycle. To see the Nile corrupted in such a way was a direct assault on their pantheon, a terrifying demonstration that the God of the Hebrews held power over the very gods of Egypt. It was a message, written in the language of decay and death, that the pillars of their entire worldview were beginning to crumble, one by one. From the perspective of a scientist, a river spontaneously transforming into hemoglobin is, of course, an impossibility. But the description of the event, water turning red, fish dying, the water becoming undrinkable, points towards a known and equally terrifying natural phenomenon. Scientists have proposed that the first plague could have been a red tide, or more accurately, a harmful algal bloom. Specifically, a bloom of a freshwater dinoflagellate, perhaps Burgundycoccus spe, also known as burgundy blood algae. Under the right conditions, these microorganisms can multiply with explosive speed. What might have created these perfect conditions? Climatologists suggest that a prolonged drought, perhaps caused by a shift in weather patterns, could have made the mighty Nile sluggish and slow-moving. Rising temperatures would have warmed the shallow water, creating an ideal incubator for these microscopic organisms. The biblical narrative also mentions that the plague was preceded by a message of warning, perhaps allowing time for these environmental conditions to fester and build. The blood, then, would be the immense concentration of these red pigmented algae, turning the entire river into a toxic crimson soup. This scientific theory aligns remarkably well with the biblical account's consequences. Certain species of these algae release potent toxins, poisons that would be lethal to fish and other aquatic life, explaining the mass die-off described in Exodus. The death and decomposition of billions of fish, combined with the metabolic byproducts of the algae themselves, would create a truly unbearable stench and render the water completely undrinkable and poisonous to anyone who consumed it. The Egyptians digging for groundwater makes perfect sense, as they sought to tap into aquifers filtered by layers of sand and silt, a natural purification system. This explanation does not diminish the power of the story. Instead, it reframes it. It suggests a possible world where a natural disaster of unprecedented scale strikes at the heart of a civilization. For a people living in a world perceived through the lens of divine action, such an event would not be seen as a random ecological fluke. It would be interpreted as a sign, a deliberate act of immense power. A god who could manipulate the very color and quality of the Nile was a god to be feared, a force capable of dismantling the predictable world and plunging it into chaos. The crimson tide of the first plague recedes, leaving behind a river of death and decay. But this is not a reprieve. It is merely the setup for the next horrifying act. The ecological devastation of the Nile becomes the very engine driving the second plague. With their natural aquatic predators, the larger fish, now dead and rotting in the toxic water, and their habitat rendered uninhabitable, one creature is forced to flee the river en masse: the frog. The banks of the Nile would have begun to teem with them, a desperate exodus from their poisoned home onto the land of Egypt. The biblical text describes an infestation of almost surreal proportions. This was not just a few frogs in the garden. It states that frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. They swarmed into the houses, into the bedrooms, upon the beds. They invaded the kitchens, the ovens, and the kneading bowls. There was no escape. Every corner of Egyptian life, from the most intimate spaces of the home to the very places where they prepared their food, was overrun by a slick, croaking, amphibious tide. The plague was absolute, a complete and total invasion of personal and public space. Imagine the psychological toll. The constant, cacophonous croaking, a deafening chorus that would never cease, day or night. The feeling of damp, squirming bodies underfoot, in your bed, on your table. The grotesque discovery of frogs baked into your daily bread. It is an image of pure chaos, a world turned upside topsy, where the natural order has completely collapsed. The barrier between the wild and the civilized world is not just breached, it is obliterated entirely. This plague was designed to be maddening, to break the spirit through relentless, disgusting, and inescapable annoyance. Symbolically, this plague was another masterstroke of psychological warfare. The frog was a creature associated with the Egyptian goddess Hecate, a deity of fertility and childbirth, often depicted with the head of a frog. She was a symbol of life and creation. To have her sacred animal become the instrument of a repulsive torment was a profound humiliation. The very symbol of Egyptian fertility was transformed into a pestilent, suffocating swarm. It was another message. Your goddess of life is powerless, and the symbol of her power now serves the will of our God, bringing you not life but misery. From a modern ecological perspective, the second plague is a textbook example of a domino effect. The first plague, the algal bloom, creates the exact conditions necessary for the second. The frogs, or more likely a species of Egyptian toad, are amphibians. They begin their lives as tadpoles in the water, but mature into land-dwelling adults. The toxic algae would have killed their predators, but might not have been as lethal to the tadpoles themselves, allowing an unusually high number to survive to maturity. Faced with a toxic, deoxygenated river, their only option for survival would be a mass migration onto the land. This sudden exodus would have been overwhelming. A single female toad can lay thousands of eggs. With a higher than normal survival rate due to the absence of predators, the result would be a population explosion of staggering proportions. The frogs would have emerged from the river not in a trickle, but as a living carpet, driven by the instinct to find new territory, moisture, and food. They would naturally be drawn to the dwellings of humans, where they could find shade, moisture in kitchens and cellars, and an abundance of insects, which would also be thriving in the chaotic conditions. The description of frogs in ovens and kneading bowls, while sounding bizarre, also has a grim logic. Seeking cool, dark, and damp places to escape the hot Egyptian sun, the clay ovens and storage jars used for dough would have been attractive shelters. The sheer number of them would mean no space was safe from their desperate search for refuge. The scale of the invasion described in the Bible, once seen through this ecological lens, moves from the realm of the purely supernatural to a terrifyingly plausible biological event, a direct and predictable consequence of the river's death. Ultimately, the plague of frogs would have ended as gruesomely as it began, forced onto a dry terrestrial environment for which they were not entirely suited, and without a clean water source, the frogs would have died in massive numbers. The Bible confirms this, stating that the Egyptians gathered them together in heaps, and the land stank. The relief from the croaking and squirming would be replaced by the overwhelming stench of millions of rotting amphibian corpses, creating a new sanitation crisis and, critically, the perfect breeding ground for the insects that would star in the plagues to come. The dominoes were continuing to fall. Out of the sacred river came a tide of life, only to perish on the land. But what follows life? What follows decay? In the grand tapestry of the cosmos, one cycle feeds another. After the frogs, a new torment emerged. A creeping plague born from the dust, called Kinnim. Was it lice, gnats, or something else? Aaron struck the dust, and a living cloud of insects rose, invading every corner of Egypt. Was this a miracle, or a chain reaction of nature? Sometimes the line blurs. The universe is filled with boundaries. The fourth plague draws a line in the sand. A swarm descends, but this time, a divine partition is made. Egypt is overrun by a chaotic horde, but the land of Goshen is spared. For the first time, a plague distinguishes between peoples, a miracle of separation. Was it nature, chance, or something more? The swarm that respected a border challenges us to see the extraordinary within the ordinary. In the cosmos, everything is connected. In ancient Egypt, animals like the bull, cow, and ram were sacred, manifestations of the divine, symbols of power and stability. The fifth plague struck at the heart of Egypt, devastating livestock and shattering their economy and faith. Yet the herds of the Israelites in Goshen were untouched, a miracle or perhaps a mystery of nature and isolation. The true cause remains debated, but the fall of Egypt's sacred beasts echoes through history as a moment of cosmic consequence. The universe is a tapestry of cause and effect, where one event inevitably leads to another. After the livestock perished, Egypt faced a new horror. A plague of boils, erupting from within, afflicting all, rich and poor, priest and laborer alike. Moses cast soot before Pharaoh, unleashing suffering across the land. No one was spared. Even Pharaoh's magicians fell. The land, already ravaged, became a breeding ground for disease. The pain was both physical and spiritual. a mark of shame and helplessness. In the end, the plague was a great equalizer, humbling all and revealing the fragility of flesh. Space is not empty. It is filled with forces both seen and unseen, capable of creation and destruction. On Earth, our atmosphere is a volatile stage for these forces. The seventh plague unleashed a paradox, hail laced with fire, raining ice and flame upon Egypt. It shattered crops, destroyed livestock, and violated the natural order. The devastation was absolute, a terrifying, blasphemous sight. This storm marked a turning point, a test of faith and prudence. Some link it to the eruption of Thera, a cataclysmic event that could explain the fire and hail. In the end, it was a reminder: the universe holds forces far beyond human control. In the intricate web of life, balance is everything. But when locusts swarm, that balance shatters. A living cloud blots out the sun, devouring all in its path. Fields, trees, and homes. Nothing is spared. The locusts finish what the hail began, leaving only devastation. You cannot reason with a swarm. It is relentless, unstoppable. For Egypt, the locusts were chaos incarnate, devouring order and hope. When the swarm finally vanished, relief came. But the land was already lost. What is our world without light? For the ancient Egyptians, this was not just a question, but a terrifying reality. The ninth plague brought a darkness so absolute it could be felt, lasting 3 days, extinguishing every flame, and paralyzing a mighty empire. This was no ordinary night, but a suffocating void that challenged the power of Pharaoh and the sun god Ra. Some believe a volcanic eruption, like Thera, cast ash over Egypt, turning day to night. Whether divine or natural, the darkness was a chilling warning, an omen of something far worse to come. The 10th plague shattered Egypt, crossing the boundary of human suffering. At midnight, a divine force struck every Egyptian home not marked by lamb's blood, taking the firstborn, from Pharaoh's heir to the lowliest captive. Grief echoed through the land, breaking Pharaoh's will at last. The Israelites, protected by faith and ritual, were spared. This night became the foundation of Passover, a story of deliverance, loss, and the price of freedom. The legacy of the firstborn's death endures, forever shaping faith, memory, and the meaning of liberation. We have journeyed through a narrative of escalating wonders and terrors. We have walked along the banks of a river of blood, felt the earth tremble under a plague of frogs, and shielded our eyes from a darkness that could be felt. The 10 plagues of Egypt remain one of history's most powerful and enduring stories, a saga that has captivated and confounded theologians, historians, and scientists for centuries. It is a story that operates on multiple levels simultaneously, as a divine intervention, a historical record, and a potent political and social allegory. The mystery is not simply what happened, but how we are to understand it across the vast gulf of time. Are these events the literal miraculous acts of an all-powerful deity, demonstrating absolute dominion over the natural world to liberate his chosen people? For millions, this is the core truth of the Exodus narrative, a foundational testament of faith that requires no scientific validation. Or could they be a chain reaction of ecological disasters, a cascade of natural phenomena triggered by a single climatic event, whose timing and severity were so extraordinary that they were interpreted as divine punishment? This perspective does not necessarily diminish the story's power, but rather reframes it as a remarkable confluence of nature and faith, where a people witness the hand of God in the fury of the natural world. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the space between these two poles. Perhaps it is not a question of either or but both and. A world where natural events, guided by a purpose beyond our comprehension, can serve as signs and wonders. The story of the plagues challenges our modern desire for clear, simple categories. It asks us to consider that history is not just a collection of facts, but also a tapestry of meaning, woven from the experiences and interpretations of those who lived it. The power of the Exodus narrative lies in its profound impact on human history, an impact that remains potent regardless of the precise mechanisms behind the events. Ultimately, the 10 plagues of Egypt serve as a timeless mirror, reflecting our own beliefs about the world. Do we see the hand of God, the patterns of nature, or the power of human storytelling. The enigma endures because it speaks to the fundamental questions of our existence: the nature of power, the price of freedom, and the search for meaning in the face of catastrophe. The answers may forever lie just beyond our reach, shrouded in the mists of ancient history and faith. We encourage you to share your own thoughts in the comments below. Were these miracles natural disasters or a profound combination of both? And if you wish to continue exploring the great mysteries of our ancient past, be sure to subscribe and join us on our next journey.